Coming up in this episode.
I really like people that do that. I think pretty much everybody does. They're kind of a rare commodity. People that can uh, say something that's likable and interesting and funny, but use different concepts than people are used to, but still ones that people can understand quickly.
What's interesting to me about that is that generally the people saying that are not arriving at that conclusion on their own. They, in my experience at least, tend to be repeating something that they've heard from someone else before, or, it's just kind of this reflexive response. What would the world be like if everyone were that way?
Right.
I don't know. It's possible that science would advance tremendously and certain things would come of it, but everything exists in a very delicate balance. And so, if everyone were that way, certain things would improve, I think, but certain things might be harmed by that. Hey, everybody, I'm Cody.
And I'm Evan,
Welcome back to Men's Search for Meaning.
the podcast where we explore concepts that we can all relate to and walk away with a deeper understanding of ourselves and what we think.
Okay, so the idea I had today was loosely based around ghosts, so bear with me. Um, I don't ultimately want to talk about ghosts, but this was the way in which I accessed the topic or the concept that I think is interesting beneath this. So, what came up, I was thinking about this common experience that many people have where maybe you're in a group of people or around certain kinds of people and something happens, like the curtain moves in an unpredictable way or something falls off of a dresser or something like that. And people say, "Oh, that was a ghost. That's probably a ghost." And it's interesting to me because, I mean, that's interesting in and of itself. But what's interesting to me about that is that generally the people saying that are not arriving at that conclusion on their own. They, in my experience at least, tend to be repeating something that they've heard from someone else before, or, it's just kind of this reflexive response. They're not like, let's evaluate the situation and determine if I think that a deceased ancestor or other person is here in the room and making their presence known by knocking my chapstick off the dresser, or something like that. And it's interesting to me because there would be more credibility to it, in my opinion, if the facts were aligning to support that hypothesis instead of someone just being like, "Oh, you know what that is? That's a ghost." Um, so it's it's a very old concept, ghosts, and so I believe it's pervasive for that reason. But it's just, yeah, it's one of those things that's interesting to me. And another example that I've seen of this same kind of concept in a different way is being on social media. Something will happen. There's a lot of sort of conspiracy theorists on social media, and so I'll see something like, an embarrassing video from the past is posted for, a musician or a actor or something like that, and people will say, "You know what this is? This is an Illuminati humiliation ritual. That's what's going on here." And they're not evaluating the situation to determine that, because there's plenty of evidence, or not evidence, but there's plenty of possibility to support the idea that simply it's an embarrassing video and it was posted because this person is famous, so people will watch it. But there's people that have this certainty that they're like, "No, you know what's going on here is it's the Illuminati," but they're not. They're kind of just saying something that's already been said before, so it's not so much about the ghost concept, but I think we can start by exploring it there and see where we end up. Does this remind you of anything, or does anything in particular stand out here? Do you relate similarly or differently?
Yeah, I have actually thought about this concept a lot as a person that loves words and communications ever
Mm,
since I was a teenager, I'd say.
yeah.
And the way I used to describe it is that people have these stock phrases that are just available to them, that you could start a sentence and they could finish it because these phrases are available to them in popular culture or in the culture they're in. And it's just what people say.
Yeah.
And nobody's thinking about whether they're being original or accurately evaluating the situation. They're just saying something. And in a way, it is pleasing to have that stock phrase snap into your speech through memory, where
Mhm.
you're just like, "Oh, wow, I get to use that phrase now, like, I'm doing the right thing, all unconscious, of course.
I think,
And,
yeah, it can
yeah.
confirm a worldview in a way, or it feels good to feel like you're prepared or you understand or something like that.
Right, it's like you're doing a dance with somebody and, like, they do, part 1 of a step and you do part 2 and it's all working out kinda thing.
Mhm,
Uh, but I have to say that I really don't like this. It annoys me because I'm someone who prefers to think originally, as we've talked about before, and, really say what I mean honestly. Not that
mhm.
I'm, can't succumb to this, like, I've done it many times.
Sure.
Uh, but I really prefer like, I have this fantasy of, either someone else or myself being able to being the type of person that says precisely what they mean regardless of how popular the words in the phrase are, and just
Mhm.
being you're smiling. Do you relate to this at all?
100%. I feel like this is one of the things that we probably relate most on, this idea that accurate communication with the right words, there's something so almost seductive about that. And in so many cases, that meaning is subverted by, colloquial definitions of things or all sorts of misunderstandings that then make it so much harder to be clearly understood. But yeah, that fantasy of like just very not like blunt and unaware communication, but just very accurate, understandable, precise language is absolutely very appealing to me.
Yeah. I feel like giving an example of a time that I succumbed to it because it was, like, 3 days ago, and it really pissed
Yeah,
me off towards myself.
it's a good
I've
example.
I've noticed that about 1 year ago, about 2023, people started using the word "wild" a lot, as in, "That's wild," and they will say it about things that are not shocking, because it
Not
is a
wild.
way not wild, yeah. Uh, it's a way of it's adding color to a sentence to mean like, "Whoa, that's so crazy." And it used to be an excellent word that you could add to a sentence, and it still was said 10 years ago or whatever. There were people that would be like, "That's wild." Um, but when they said it, it was welcome. It was original because it's a
Mhm.
pretty unique thing to say. Now it's not unique at all, and I have made a pact with myself that I will never say "That's wild" until it goes out of style. And 3 days ago, I was talking, to my wife, and she said something or other, and I was like, "That is just wild." And then I was like, "Oh!" And I could tell she looked at me like, "Is it really wild?" Because she's a bit like we are. And I
Yeah,
was embarrassed, and, we just moved on from it. She didn't mention it. I don't know if she would think she picked up on it, but I imagine she did. And I am still kicking myself for that because I I wanted to accurately describe it. If it was a feral thing, if it was, an outlandish thing,
yeah,
I I wanna say the right words for that and not just take the stock vocabulary, but it did feel a little good to say it too, which I don't like to
yeah.
report, but yeah.
I mean, there's a lot of people that would think of us as overthinkers. I don't think of myself as an overthinker because I enjoy the degree to which I consider things and explore them. But to many
Mhm.
people, I think we would be considered overthinkers. And even as what could be considered an overthinker, this kind of thing does happen. I mean, I know for a fact that I say that's wild probably more often than you do. And they're just like because of all the social situation that we're in as people and how many people we're communicating with and what we hear from other people, this is just something that everyone's going to fall prey to because we get these things become familiar and therefore they're close at hand when a situation arises. But I do agree that I think as much as is possible, we are people that attempt to describe things accurately because there's something ultimately more comforting about understanding in a more precise way. You mentioned there being some comfort or some enjoyment in saying that's wild, like there was some draw to that, but I think, it bothered you even noticing that you did that, which points to the fact that you do have a strong desire to communicate more accurately and with intention instead of automatically, which I is something that I relate with as well, and probably why this ghost example stood out to me because I'm like, my first thought is there's no evidence to support that. Or like, how would you say that you know that that's what's happening, that that's a ghost? You could wonder if that's a ghost. I would be more willing to accept someone going, "Oh, wow, I wonder if that was a ghost." I would still probably say, "Well, that's a bit wild to say," but um, yeah, I think it stands out to me in that way because it doesn't feel like it's the result of some careful thought. So I want to try to take that concept deeper as we often do and try to understand what is beneath the ghost thing, because it's not really about the ghost thing. It's about what would you say? Do you think it's about it's probably a number of things, but where does that lead you?
Well, I think of it as about communication. Well, this is one branch that I wanna try and see if it's interesting to you,
Sure.
is that the purpose of communication, I believe, to us, is mainly to express what's within, what you're thinking, and perhaps to influence the other person depending on, the context of the communication. But to some people, the purpose of communication most of the time is simply to, be liked by them or fit in. And I'm thinking of
Mhm.
teenagers. Like I was watching two 10-year-olds talk. I won't say some of my family basically, and
Mhm.
they were using a lot of slang phrases and using a tone of voice that I could just tell was like the way that both of them thought they should talk. And I
Mhm.
was like, these people are not concerned with communicating ideas to each other. Well, they're communicating certain ideas, but they mostly just want to be accepted by each other and feel comfortable and feel that the other one is cool. Like there's some sort of ritual going on that doesn't have to do with accurately describing a situation in order to, develop what's next in that situation.
Mm.
That is not what's happening. And so
Yeah.
that can be the purpose of communication. But I guess I'd like to know I'm really in a fun kind of context and, like, that's what I'm doing before doing it. Most of the time, I don't think I use communication that way. I'm curious
Yeah.
about you.
Makes me think of our episode on small talk because one of the things, not to spoil it for people who haven't seen that, but one of the things that we discussed in there was that small talk is not about communicating deep ideas or very true ideas or, authentic things. And I think what we determined there is that in part at least it's about developing trust and sort of investigating what this other person might be like, if
Mm,
you can rely on them, if they feel congruent with you. And I see the same thing happening in that situation you're describing about two very young people communicating. I think actually communicating important ideas is not important because generally at that age you don't really have a lot to say. You're kind of formulating who you are and what you care about and what you think, but it's still very much in development as it should be. And so at that point, communication is like a bonding thing or a demonstration. Like I think of it as an animalistic thing in a way, because I think we all have animalistic traits to us at various points in our lives. And that one feels kind of like some sort of dance, that not a mating dance or something, but some sort of dance or ritual that one member of a group would do to the other to show that they kind of understand things, or it feels like a display because they're saying things that have been demonstrated socially to be popular things to say. Even the tone of voice that they're using might not be totally authentic, but it's a demonstration, to show I'm cool, you want to be friends with me. And establishing social connections at that age is so critically important that we all did that in ways that might even feel very cringy to us in the long term, because it feels so different from how we end up being around, communication or ways of being, at least for us. um, so yeah, that's what stands out to me, is that many forms of communication cannot be about communicating.
that's I think you summarized it in a great way, uh, that, there's a demonstration going on or there's just a bonding going on. Um, yeah, so I think that's accurate. I was just having a thought. I oh, I was thinking about every now and then you run into somebody that is funny in this, kind of original way, and they are not doing they are doing, like, demonstrations and bonding through their speech, let's say a younger
Mhm.
person, but they can do it in a different way, and I think those people are just very valuable because they do that, and, for some reason, I'm thinking of this, uh, social media it was like a reel, and it's this girl saying she doesn't like to work. I don't know, she's probably late 20s or whatever.
Mhm.
She's saying she doesn't like to have a corporate job, that she wants to be a frog on a rock instead and just sit under a cool rock. Have you seen that? Or did you send me that? No, okay.
No, but I've been exposed to that concept of people kind of, uh, what's the word? People sort of yearning for these simple, silly lives because it does crystallize a concept of people feeling like lives are so complicated nowadays.
Yeah. Well, I'm not sure if it was her original idea, but I'm gonna assume it is. Somebody came up with this, and she was bold enough to be the one to say that. I'd never heard that before,
Mhm.
of just someone being like, "I just wanna be on a cool rock and just, like, have some bugs," and, I found it charming and quite funny, because she wasn't just using stock language to express. There's a lot of stock language you could use to express the fact that, the corporate life isn't the right life and, blah, blah, blah. There's a lot of directions you can go.
Mhm.
Um, I really like people that do that. I think pretty much everybody does. They're kind of a rare commodity. People that can uh, say something that's likable and interesting and funny, but use different concepts than people are used to, but still ones that people can understand quickly. I mean, probably a good comedian is doing that.
Yeah, that's
So
what I see as the mark of a great comedian because this is something we've talked about, I think, just individually before. But since we're on the topic of, the whole ghost thing is like original ideas versus repeating ideas. And so this does feel like a natural extension of that. And I think comedians, first and foremost, before being funny, are clever observers. They recognize something that is something that stands out to them. Maybe it's just in a interaction they're having with a person or various times they take note of that and then either through some work and effort or perhaps automatically, I think there's a spectrum between those that exists as well, find a thing that's funny about it. But I think good humor always starts with a clever observation and then it's the way you talk about that that makes it funny. And I see that as the mark of a great comedian. They're like, "Oh, wow, how did they even think to bring this up or notice this?" And some people copy other people and whatnot. I think there's a lot of sharing of ideas just generally going on, but that observation um, is the kernel of good comedy, a clever, unique, sort of insightful observation, and then you tell it in a way that makes people laugh. And I very much enjoy that same thing as well.
so that's I guess that's one thing I wanted to bring up because, we can say that a lot of people that say, "Oh, it's a ghost," are being unoriginal, but I think there's some other
Mm,
situations there too. First of all, there's a way to be uh, original without, like, going against, social levity or social acceptance, the thing that's gonna make everybody comfortable. You could do it in an
mhm,
unoriginal way, and the rare person could do it in an original way. I think we've established that.
mhm,
Um, I guess one thing I wanna bring up is that the reason that people say it's a ghost, like, is that there's something correct about that. It's been around for a long time. People have explained, a curtain blowing as more than just the wind or a chapstick falling off the shelf, as you said,
mhm,
as a ghost because, there's something that is fitting about a mysterious thing that you can't find any available explanation for.
mhm,
And then, if there's something slightly eerie about it, assigning that to, one of the eerier concepts that there's an invisible force doing it. Like there
mhm.
must be something correct if it's used that much. I like to give credit to things that have been around for decades, phrases that I've used that like they must work. So while
Yeah.
unoriginal, there's something there.
Yeah, that's an interesting perspective. I feel slightly differently about it. I think sometimes, especially ideas that exist and emerge from much older points in time, they can be very insightful and clever. And I think sometimes they can be due to at that time we lacked enough of an understanding. It's like, if a woman in the Middle Ages was too smart. They're like, "She's a witch. There's no other answer for it," and now we're like, "Ooh, why did we do that?" You know?
Mhm,
So
mhm.
I see it potentially being that way where sometimes these things can be due to we don't know how else to explain it, and so that's the best possible explanation. But it makes me wonder, if do you think of the term, because the way you're describing it, the term ghost makes me think that you consider it to be this kind of larger, less defined category of a mysterious event.
Mhm.
And I think I was coming into the conversation thinking of ghost as like, this is a dead person, a specific dead person who is now here for some purpose. Um, and do you think of it that way, or do you think of it more as like for example, to illustrate this concept, some people think of the concept of God as like a very specific person, and some people think of the concept of God as like just the entirety of nature and the forces that govern the world. So more of an ambiguous um, category than like a very specific entity. Where do you think you fall on that? Do you believe in ghosts? Tell the people right now.
Um, I do think there's a referent in your mind of what ghost means when you say it, and to most people, it is an individual who has died and is now passing through the space or possibly haunting the space. So
Mhm.
I believe that. I guess I was just meaning that people say it quickly and they basically just mean it's something mysterious and they get to add some color to the I can't explain that. Instead of saying I can't explain it, that was weird, they get to
Mhm.
add some intrigue and up the social stakes a little bit in that moment. I guess that's what I
Yeah.
meant. But I think I do agree with you that most people have the same referent when they say ghost.
Yeah. Yeah, I think that does, in my mind, points to some interesting, personality distinctions because, with me and my background, a big part of my education and kind of chosen path was very, heavy science based, and one of the things I really liked about that was, um understanding what it takes to be certain of something, like good experimental design to demonstrate something. It's really hard to prove things and very easy to disprove things. And I hold knowing the answer in this very special, hard to reach place because it's such a difficult ideal to reach. And so I think in a situation like that, I and I'm not saying this is right or wrong, just simply describing my own experience. I kind of enjoy being like, "Oh, I wonder what that is. That's a very interesting thing that happened. I wonder what that is." And it can really engage my curiosity, and sometimes I will, you know me, sometimes I'll be like, "I need to figure out what's going on here."
Yep.
Um, and I really want to sort of chase down what seems to be the truth there. And I think there's people that feel more comfortable being like, I know what that is. That's this. Or like, this is one of those situations. Here's what you should do." And that's what makes them feel comfortable. And I don't think there's a right or wrong. I know what I personally prefer. Um, but yeah, I think that comes up here. It's like someone who would say, well, it's a ghost, I think feels more comfortable deciding or being confident in what has happened and less comfortable wondering about what it might be. There's a lot of people that don't feel comfortable with not having an answer, and they will accept simpler, typically um, imperfect answers because that feels more comfortable than going, I have no idea what that was. That's weird. So I think it's a personality thing. Would you agree with that?
I agree. I think there's one other thing to add, though. There are some people that do that say that because they're uncomfortable with having to dig really deep to find the answer, like, look
Mhm.
for clues in the room of what had happened and stop what they're doing.
Yeah,
There's a lot of people that would rather just, keep it going and not have anything unusual or too original happen.
sure.
Um, and I think there's some people that really welcome the opportunity for a piece of their worldview that's exciting or useful to them to be able to be used. So, to many people, I think nowadays the concept of a ghost or the supernatural is a part of their personality that they want to express, or it's an idea that they have taken comfort in or felt like they mastered in the past. Maybe at some point as a kid, they were afraid of ghosts. And then they started to think, ghosts can be friendly and there's something really important happening. They need to settle the score of what happened in their past life. And maybe that's
Mhm.
become an important concept to them. And so they'd welcome the idea of the mysterious happening because now they get to get into that part of their worldview. and talk about it seriously, because there are many
Yeah.
people that would take that seriously and feel that it's a ghost. Um, and I have to say I don't mind that if they're passionate about it, and
Mhm.
there's all these things we don't know, about what's possible, like 1,000 years from now, how primitive will our understanding of things be?
Mhm.
I kinda like that there's people that reach a little further into things that can't be easily proven,
Mhm.
but I guess my overall point is just that that may be an exciting confirming moment for some people, not just a moment to quickly pass by because they can't explain it.
Yeah. Yeah, this gets into very interesting territory because it shows how extremely complex human beings are
Mhm.
and how there just is a not a right way of doing things, I kind of want to say. Um because what you're describing could be a practical and important way for someone to work through something or to um I don't know, to achieve something. Like you said, maybe they had a complex relationship with feeling afraid of the idea of ghosts. And perhaps at this point in their life, they're like, you know what? I'm okay with them being there and I'm going to welcome that or something. I don't feel afraid of that anymore. And I think being able to work through things as an individual like that is super important. And if we were all doing that to the best of our ability, I think the world would be a much better place. So it's very hard for me to take issue with that piece in and of itself because I think people growing and trying to better themselves or heal past wounds or something like that is very important work. Um, it conflicts with my personal um, perspective or philosophy of truth and understanding. Like I really hold truth, knowledge, and understanding to such a high degree because for me it's very important to have certainty and to understand things. And if I don't understand something, not to just fill in that gap with like, well, maybe it's this.
Yeah, maybe there's a positive spin on it though, because you're really into provability,
Mhm,
and like I would want every scientist to feel exactly the same way you do,
mhm,
and yet I would want artists to feel the other way that you don't feel, where they're comfortable trying out an idea in a space where they can't easily find a provable answer,
yeah.
because they push our thinking to new areas, perhaps cause scientists ultimately to do experiments in those areas.
Mhm,
Maybe find things that many people feel, but nothing has been proven. So, these are likely to be true, and perhaps with more experimentation and, new uncoverings, they could be true. So I think there's a utility to your way, which I'm a little closer to your way myself.
mhm,
But I think there's a little part of me that likes to do it the other way and uh, choose something that intuitively feels right and sometimes indulge it. I don't know that I would assert it as truth unless it was provable, but I would indulge
yeah,
it, and perhaps I would assert it if I deeply felt if it rang true to me as being true,
yeah,
even if not provable. I would trust that over something provable, unless it's in the realm of physics or something like hard science.
yeah, yeah. That's a great point. Um, we're very deep in the philosophy of it now, which I'm enjoying because it's it's easy and sometimes it's a very confirming experience to be attached to our way of looking at something. And in this situation, I feel attached to the pursuit of truth and knowledge and truly knowing something, not just filling in the blanks with what we have available, but really being able to demonstrate with certainty what's happening. However, what would the world be like if everyone were that way?
Right.
I don't know. It's possible that science would advance tremendously and certain things would come of it, but everything exists in a very delicate balance. And so, if everyone were that way, certain things would improve, I think, but certain things might be harmed by that. Like you mentioned wanting an artist to have a different way of looking at things. And I think I can agree with that in ways because our world in many ways is enriched by people who feel differently than us.
Mhm.
And it's sort of like order from disorder, that they disagree with us, which could be looked at as a form of disorder, but that creates something that benefits us. Like for example, um, music that we might enjoy and could really enrich our lives and improve our lives in strong ways could be written by someone who feels fundamentally different from us on many issues. And so it's like, is that a problem then? Would we not want to listen to their music? I mean, some people, once they learn about the people making the music, they can't listen to it anymore because they can't forget that. But I tend to think of, I want the music for me exists separate from the person because the music is separate from the person. It is something that they've created and pushed off into the world. It emerged from them, but it's taken on its new life and its new personality out there on its own. And I think you're making a good point, basically, that various perspectives can be of value, and it's hard for me to even say that because I worry about that being used to empower people who just blatantly deny science and want to determine facts for themselves. I think an openness to external perspectives and to really thinking about information doesn't have to only support a scientific perspective. But I do think that piece is important wherever it leads someone that people are really thinking about things and considering them instead of
Right.
just deciding, I'm closed off to all new information. I've decided that reptilian overlords are running the government, and that's that. And there's nothing you can say. That kind of thing I think is dangerous. But anyways, sorry to getting into the weeds here. What stands out to you there?
Well, first I wanna respond to something you're saying, and then I had another thought.
Yeah,
I think it's overall good, as you're sort of reluctantly admitting, to have people, have different ideas that aren't necessarily provable in order to, bring us into different areas that perhaps one day can be proven or perhaps just really ring true
sure.
to a lot of people. But, there's something particularly insidious about something we see online nowadays, which is people saying things that are not true in order to get attention, clicks,
Or
or
make
whatever,
money or
or
something like
make
that.
money. There's something really insidious about that because if it were like just two people talking and someone was saying, you know what, I just have this impulse that like goes surreal, like I don't mind that person. I do
Mhm,
mind the person that says like, Britney Spears haunted by ghosts and they're just trying to get clicks or whatever.
mhm.
Because they are inciting like, they're not spreading a personal truth or a physical truth.
They're seeking to manipulate.
They're seeking yeah, that's the
I
insidious stuff that both of us hate.
totally agree with you there, and I wanna do a whole episode on that concept because I think it's far more pervasive than I am able to tolerate because I also agree that um, seeking to manipulate people with misinformation like that is horribly unforgivable in my mind, and that
Uh-huh.
bothers me. And I didn't even think about that in this conversation. I was thinking about just kind of the individual sitting at home pondering things or talking with friends or family or something, but didn't think of it as the bigger scale of trying to, take advantage of people or that person, I don't know. It gets into different territory that we should probably talk about at another time. But I'm glad you brought that up because I absolutely agree, and I feel a little bit angry just thinking about it.
I know, me too. But just to, I guess, finish out the idea of
Yep.
needing other perspectives, this was occurring to me is that it seems like most of the field of psychology falls under that, where it's like not hard science, but it is clearly like a lot of concepts in the field of psychology are just clearly true, and they needed to be said by people that have observed it with patients or subjects over a period of time, and it could be decades later that these things receive scientific confirmation or whatever with multiple double-blind studies or whatever. Um,
Yeah.
and one example I'm thinking of is like at one point I saw an article somewhere that says like studies confirm that mental stress causes like physical illnesses, and my reaction to that was like it's the most obvious thing I've ever heard. I couldn't care less
Mm.
about that study. It's like, confirming that gravity exists or something like that. And yet, we do ultimately need, or certainly scientifically minded people do need things to be proven, but certain things can be observed over time, and many people can consider them true before they are proven, and that's just an example of the system working well. Of what we're calling artists, but people that are pushing the limits a little bit based on what they observe, what they intuit,
Mhm.
Ultimately, this stuff does get proven eventually.
Yeah. Yeah, I think it solidifies something for me, which is that at the core, exploration is key, and, pretty much anything that we know now and take for granted was at one point some bold, daring mind exploring in a new direction, and then it became fact, and they might have even been killed for it at the time because it clashed with what was going on. So I think that is a key part of, we think of hard science as just this very proven, rigorous matrix of information, but it often emerges from someone being like, you know what, I wonder if this is actually what's going on, and then they seek to demonstrate that. I think the key piece in there is what you do with conflicting information, because many of those people, if they received information that took them in a different direction, they'd say, okay, point taken. I will respect the information that I'm getting, and so I think that's an important piece in there, is being willing to be steered by what observations confirm. I don't want to say what the facts support, because there's not always facts there, but that openness, I think, is a key part of being like, you know what, this is what I felt to be true, but I'm receiving conflicting information. I'm going to incorporate that in and change the way I approach things. I consider that to be an important piece there as well.
I'm with you. Is there anything else that stands out to you? I feel like we covered this topic very well.
You mentioned there being one other that you wanted to respond to something I was saying, and there was another topic you want to bring up. Did we cover that piece already? Just if you
I
happen to
believe
remember.
so. Yeah, I had one stray thought about the witch thing, but we don't need to go there.
Okay. Yeah, what did we not cover? So we took it from the idea of people suggesting something being explained by a ghost. We delved deeper into the kind of psychology and philosophy of that, and took it in some different directions that kind of moved away from that starting point for a while, which is something that I think is good, because usually the subject that I'm introducing the concept with is not something that I consider um, directly related to the concept. It's sort of like um, an entrance to a cave or something like that. The cave stands alone from the entrance, and I don't want to focus on the entrance so much as what we're exploring
Woohoo.
beneath that. And there might be multiple entrances to the same thing.
Yeah.
So yeah, I think we probably did cover that. This would be a good time to say, if anyone's watching the video and they feel like we did miss an area from their perspective or something that they would have liked to hear included, let us know in the comments, because I think it's safe to consider this all of these conversations we're having as continuing in the comment section. We very much looking forward to hearing what other people think, and we'll reply to as many of those as we're able to, because that is part of this. These are not just finite conversations that start and stop, but more ongoing discussions about things, and we really want to hear what people watching think, and that could inspire ideas for new episodes. So feel free to say whatever you're thinking down below. We just ask that you keep it respectful, so there are some boundaries there, at least, because that's an important part of healthy conversation, I would say. And if you enjoyed the video, please hit the like button. That's the best way that you can support us. Additionally, if you want to see our videos in your feed, make sure to subscribe. And if you want to be notified when we upload, subscribe and then hit the bell icon. We look forward to hearing from you guys. And thank you so much for watching and hanging out with us today.